Good afternoon, men. Welcome to the Daily Connection for January 19th, 2019. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day of being the hardworking, dedicated, productive individuals that you are to make this connection and make these distinctions that hopefully you're going to learn today. I am very excited for today's connection. I'm going to try and keep this brief because this is something that I could go on any one of these topics for quite some time. But as I was reading, and I try and make a point to read every single day, anywhere from 10 minutes to a couple hours. Reading is so good for you intellectually. It gives you a different perspective, can motivate you, can inspire you, can really change your life. One expression that I heard once is, at the end of your life, all you're going to have are the relationships that you've created and the books that you've read. And the great thing about learning, the great thing about reading is no one can ever take your knowledge away from you. So if you don't actively read, highly recommend taking just 10 minutes a day. Pick some book off of a shelf that you have at home. If you've read it before, that's fine. If you haven't read it and you've always wanted to, really give it a shot. And right now I'm reading The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Fantastic novel, and I've read about half of it before, and you know how it is. Life gets busy, you kind of put some things on the back burner, and then you realize after some time that, you haven't done anything with it. So I've had to go back and starting from the beginning, and I cranked out, probably read at least 60 pages today, and after I'm done recording this, I'm going to do some more reading. But I realized today, as I was deep in thought, and philosophy is it's a passionate topic of mine, something I really love, something I really appreciate and I'm fascinated by. And I realized today, at least for right now, I believe there are 6 pillars of identity. And I'm not saying that written in stone, that there's only these 6, as I'm welcome to entertaining the possibility of more. So if you think of more categories, please let me know, and I would be happy to espouse my thoughts on them. 6 pillars of identity: the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual, the financial, and the social. And I'm going to elaborate on each one of these in a bit. So outside of the one word that best surmises each one of those pillars, I have kind of a subcategory, or not subcategory, but the primary description. So physical, part of your identity would be fitness. Intellectual should be reason or logic. Emotional is going to be your own fulfillment. Spiritual would be your purpose or meaning in life. Financial would be productiveness. And social would be relationships. And again, if you think of another category that could constitute another pillar of individuality, let me know. I would be very entertained to hear what you guys have to say. So let's elaborate on some of these a bit. But before we get into that, I tend to think the purpose of life, at least for me, and it may be different for you, I think it's every man's moral obligation to fulfill his potential in every one of these categories. And the reason I feel that way is philosophically, I believe the best type of art is romantic naturalism. And romantic naturalism is art that describes life as it could be and as it should be. Those are the most fulfilling and inspirational pieces of art to me, are the ones that show what man could be, what man should be doing with his life, that make man into the heroic character that he is of his own life. And other lesser categories of art would be ones that don't do that, I suppose, for lack of a better description. So I believe, due to my love of romantic art and aesthetics, that it is our purpose, not that we have an objective absolute purpose, but my purpose, and I hope your purpose as well after listening to this, is to try and maximize every one of these categories that you have in life, because this life is all you have. You have maybe 60 good years of control where you are the chief engineer determining what your life is going to be like. And you think about it, as a minor, you don't have a lot of time to yourself. Your parents kind of raise you. They dictate so much in your life. You get your driver's license at 16. You get that first little taste of freedom, but you really don't get to experience how open and beautiful and amazing this world is until you're really out on your own. For some people it's 18, for some people it's a little bit later, but let's suppose you have 60 good years, and that might be generous. So 60 good years would take you from 18 to 78, which is about the point in our life when most men in America die. That's about the average life expectancy, 78. So let's say you have 60 good years. What do you want to do with those 60 years? That's a very limited amount of time to really spend your life doing what you want to do and to really create the life and to really leave the impact that you want on the world. Regardless of whether you're religious or not, this life is all we have. We only get one go around on this earth, and what happens after that, who knows? But do you really want to look back at the end of your life, sitting in a retirement home, or if you're so lucky to be in your own house surrounded by people you love, do you really want to look back and realize at that point in your life, at that point, that it's too late to do anything that you ever really wanted to do, and you never took those chances, you never had those risks, and you never made those connections, you never went for it? Do you really want that regret? And that's why I'm doing this podcast today. 6 pillars of identity, as I deeply believe it is your obligation as a man to maximize your potential in every one of these categories. So let's start with the physical. Physical. By physical, I mean fitness. Maximizing your genetic potential while maintaining optimal health. Genetic potential, meaning maximizing your muscle mass, if you so desire, minimizing body fat, and also maintaining some degree of athletic capability. And the two generally correlate together very well. Very fit individuals in terms of athletic capability tend to have fairly decent body composition. And those who maintain a certain degree of muscle mass above normal levels for them and minimal levels of body fat also tend to be quite athletic. Also, big focus on health. Health is essentially a measure of how alive you are. Someone who's sick is closer to death than someone who is not alive. So with health, it's absolutely a moral obligation. Without life, you don't have any other values. Every single value is contingent on having the value of life. And health being a derivative of life, it is absolutely essential that you guys are healthy. So physical, interestingly enough, we tend to overemphasize. We spend so much time in the gym, so much time in our workouts, focusing on every little detail that we're going to eat, nailing that nutrient timing, getting our supplements dialed in just right, visiting the doctor, making sure our hormones are exactly where they need to be. We spend so much time on the physical, especially if you're listening to this and you're like me and you have a real kind of interest in the gym and physical fitness and building muscle and losing fat and everything that comes with that. That we tend to underemphasize the other areas. But interestingly enough, out of these 6 pillars of identity, the physical fitness is probably the one that requires the least amount of effort. Truth is, you got to eat for the most part every day anyways, and it doesn't take a lot more time and it doesn't take a lot more effort to eat healthy food than it does junk food in a sense. It doesn't take a lot of time to sit down 1 or 2 days a week and actually meal prep for the rest of the week if that's what you like to do. It doesn't take a lot of time to accurately track calories and protein, carbs, and fat if that's your thing. If you're spending time in the gym, I really don't think you need to spend about maybe more than an hour a week in the gym. Some individuals like to go more frequently, good for them. But I tend to think past a certain point, and you know what, even if you're spending an hour a day, 5 days a week or 6 days a week, there are 168 hours in a week. So 6 hours, if you're going Monday through Saturday, an hour a day, 6 hours a week focused on your physical fitness is not a lot. And you couple that with just maybe a couple more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes a meal to really track your food or to produce something that's a little bit healthier. It doesn't take a lot to maximize your physical fitness. It just takes time and it takes consistency. Intellectual pillar of identity, reason and logic. I really wish they taught philosophy in high school. And most people think of philosophy as just these kind of intellectual arguments that people have that don't really contribute much. But proper philosophy is it's a way of thinking. Your philosophy is the way you view the world, and there are 5 branches of philosophy. Metaphysics, which is how you view reality. Epistemology, which is how you know that you know things. Ethics, which is morality or right and wrong. A derivative of ethics will be politics, and another derivative of ethics would also be aesthetics or art. And these are the 5 main branches of philosophy. So whether you recognize it or not, you have beliefs in every single one of those areas. And collectively, they constitute your philosophy with the world and how the world operates, and essentially determine every decision that you're going to make. Every belief you have is run through the filter of your philosophy. And if you don't actively take stock of the way you view the world and at your own epistemology of why you believe what you believe and how you know what you know, we tend to live very reactionary to the world around us. And if you're listening to this and you're determined to not only taking your health, but these other areas of your life to a next level, you really should spend some time understanding and questioning why you believe what you believe and what you believe in the first place. Reason, logic, Aristotelian logic should be the primary faculty of which we evaluate the world around us. Aristotle, Greek philosopher, I believe lived around 400 BC, is often credited as the founder of logic, and it's not really true. There's another individual that came before him, but Aristotle was the first one to really systematically kind of create what we now understand as laws of logic. Things like the law of identity, A equals A. Things like the law of non-contradiction, something cannot be A and non-A at the same time in the same manner. And knowing sort of this syllogistic logic and laws of non-contradiction can help you think more clearly. Logic, in a sense, is the art of proper deductive thinking. And you could also make inductive arguments, but most of logic is coming up with premises. And if these premises are valid, the conclusion must also be true. And the most classic example is premise 1, Socrates is a man. Premise 2, all men are mortal. And then the logical conclusion would be, therefore, Socrates will die, or Socrates is mortal. If the 2 premises are true, the conclusion must logically follow. And things like the laws of non-contradiction are just, and there's probably 100 or so of them. There are different ways that we often think about situations, but it's sort of a mathematical error. Things do not logically follow. It's a flaw in our thinking that leads to an incorrect conclusion based on the premises. So every thing that we see in life, every single sensory input, everything we see, everything we hear, everything that we experience needs to be filtered through a rational mind using logic that can determine if these experiences are valid, and then can integrate these sensory experiences and this information that we collect into concepts. And then from concepts that are integrated, we can form beliefs, and from beliefs, we can determine the course of our lives. But it all goes back to logic. So I would highly recommend, if you've never studied philosophy before, just learning the basics of logic, learning how epistemology works and how you know what you know. And that's such an important aspect of lives because you'll start to see how erroneous people can be in their reasoning and in their thinking sometimes. And not so you can point it out and show them how they're wrong, but how you can be more clear in understanding yourself and how you operate and how you think. I cannot recommend at least understanding the basics of philosophy enough. Emotional. By emotional pillar of identity, I mean fulfillment. Self-identity. How do you feel about yourself? Self-worth, confidence, self-esteem. Self-esteem is sorely lacking in 21st century America. And if you're listening from somewhere else in the world, I can't really vouch for how your society is. But here in America, maybe 1 out of 100 men are true confident leaders, are alpha males. And by alpha, I just mean leader. Someone's got to be first. Someone has to lead the group. Someone has to do it. It might as well be you, right? But self-esteem is one of those things, and I don't know why it's lacking so much in today's world. I think it's because from a very early age, we're taught to so often put others before ourselves. And if you want to help somebody else out, that's fine if it's of your own free will and volition. But if you're making a sacrifice, if you're sacrificing your own happiness, your own well-being in some regard to help somebody else out, I would say that's immoral. Sacrifice by definition is getting rid of a greater good to help a lesser good. It's a bad trade-off. It's an unequal trade. Don't ever sacrifice your own well-being for the sacrifice of others. Now, the reason, and that necessitates some clarity, if you love your wife, if you love your kids, they are of value to you. So you're not sacrificing by doing something nice for your kids or putting your kids before yourself. That is actually a selfish maneuver because they mean something to you. Their happiness is important to you. Their well-being is important to you. So you make it a priority to emphasize that. But we're taught so often from a young age that can't be selfish. We always have to put others before ourselves. That I think it creates this belief in our heads from an early level that we're not as good as other people. And we're not good enough, and we just don't deserve as much as other people do because we're always putting everybody else before ourselves. Let me ask you something. Is self-esteem important? How about self-image? How about self-worth? How about self-actualization? See, all of those things are focused on the self, and all selfishness means is focused on the self. We have this negative connotation here in America that being selfish means not only are you going to put yourself first, but you're also going to do it at the expense of somebody else. And that's not in the definition. So it's a definition fallacy. If we're going back to logic and logical fallacies, selfishness solely means focused on the self. So if self-esteem, if self-worth, if self-respect, if self-image, if self-actualization, if all of these things are important, self-love, if these are all important, then how the hell is being selfish bad? Selfishness, at least rational selfishness, is a virtue. It's one of the most important things you can do is learn to put yourself first because you can't give what you don't have. And if you're listening to this, you probably put a lot of time and effort into your fitness. But how much more important are all these other areas of your life so far? You know, the physical fitness, like we already talked about it, that can be done very easily with not a lot of effort. Sorry about that. My daughter knocked on the door, so I had to pause for a second. Selfishness is a virtue when rational and when properly done. So for our purposes, selfishness just means knowing what's important to you and making that a priority. You are not obligated to anybody else. And I would say it's actually probably immoral to be a slave to somebody else or to have somebody else be a slave to you. But getting back on track with you can't give what you don't have. Say you want to give money to charity. Well, how are you going to give money if you don't have it? If you love your wife, for example, you put a tremendous value on her and for what she brings to the relationship. So you would do anything for her well-being and for her benefit and for her happiness because she isn't so important to you. Because she is so important to you, excuse me. That is because you're selfish. You take a selfish pleasure in her well-being because she brings you so much happiness. She brings you more happiness than anything else, right? So you would not sacrifice because her love and her happiness is more important, but you would make that value judgment. You need to be more selfish in life. Again, you can't give what you don't have. You can't give happiness to other people if you're not happy, if you're not confident. And especially as parents. I don't know how many of you guys out there have kids, but like I've talked about before, I have a daughter that's about 5.5. If I want her to be confident, I have to be 10 times more confident than I expect her to be. If I want her to dress nice and to be eloquent and well-spoken and show up on time and have high standards and all these other things, I have to lead by example. Now, I love my daughter. I would do anything for my daughter. She means the world to me. But if I'm not focusing on these things, and if I'm not taking care of business, I can't hold her to that standard. You can't give what you don't have. You need to be more selfish, not at the expense of others. And if you do things in the right way, as we're going to talk about with financial here in a little bit, you can actually help others out, and you can bring a lot of people with you if you structure it the right way. Your emotional identity is your self-identity. Who are you as a man? Your self-worth. How do you feel about yourself? Your confidence, your self-esteem. That's your emotional health, and that is very, very underutilized with men in 21st century America here. We're often taught to downplay our emotions, to not think about them, not be emotional, but that is one of the most powerful driving forces that you have, men. Do not undersell your emotional worth. And that's one of the biggest pillars I have with coaching clients, because again, like we've talked about, if you've listened to any of this journey so far, everything we want in life is emotional. We don't even want things. We want the emotions that we associate to those things. We are driven as people by emotion, because of the emotions that we want, and largely and more so by the emotions that we're trying to get away from, by the negative emotions that we're trying to avoid. Do not downplay the strength of your emotions and how powerful they can be in your life, and how they can get you to achieve anything, and work on less sleep, and work harder, and be more dedicated and committed and passionate and interested in so many of these other awesome ways in life. You guys have no clue how awesome it is to just live with passion and to be totally happy and confident and aware and just loving every minute of your life. And that doesn't mean that you're content. That means you understand how incredible this life is and how incredible this life can be, and you're committed to making things better for yourself, for your family, and for everybody around you. That's your emotional well-being. Financial. Financial, I would sum up as productiveness. We have a largely capitalist society here in America. I would say it's more of a mixed economy now. But the way commerce works, at least in a fairly capitalist society, it's an exchange of good or service for mutual benefit. Both people benefit. Both parties benefit in mutual exchange in a capitalist market. So Apple, the company, right? They make $1 bazillion. Recently, what's the newest iPhone? The iPhone 10 sold for about $1,000. How much is that iPhone worth to Apple? Well, they value it at $1,000, but it's actually worth less than $1,000. And the people that buy it, that iPhone is worth more than $1,000 that it's priced at. So from Apple's standpoint, it costs them less than $1,000 to sell that phone, but that's what they price it at. So they're making money off the bat, right? For the consumer that spends $1,000 on the iPhone, that $1,000 phone is worth far more than $1,000. Both people benefit. Apple makes money on the phones. The people get more than what $1,000 means to them by buying that phone. Productiveness in terms of your financial identity is going to be finding some purpose in your work life, if you decide to work, that generates value for yourself and for the people around you. It's creating mutually beneficial relationships and helping others while helping yourself. And that's what I mean by financial productiveness. And if you can do that, and if you can bring a tremendous amount of value to somebody's life, you're going to make money in the process. And interestingly enough, I almost lumped in money to emotional, and that's a talk for another day, but something I do with my clients is we do something called the money game, and we really analyze your rules and your beliefs about money. But I do believe it's an important enough issue, and too many people nowadays struggle with their finances because they undervalue their own services and they undervalue their own worth. And that also, again, ties back into the emotional identity. Social relationships. And this goes for more than just, wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. This also goes for friends. This goes for coworkers. Your emotional identity is who are you going to be and what type of relationships do you want to have within that group? Do you want to get married someday? Do you want to start a family? Do you want to have a boyfriend, girlfriend? Do you want to just be that crazy uncle that spoils all their nephews and nieces? First step is identity. What kind of relationships do you want to have? Second, who do you want to have them with? And third, what type of individual do you want to be within that group or within that relationship? And relationships are built on trust, and just like finance is built on mutual benefit. Finally, spiritual. Spiritual I define as purpose or meaning, or maybe even legacy. What legacy do you want to leave? What do you want to spend your life working towards? What ultimate meaning and goals do you have that you're trying to accomplish with this limited amount of time that you have while you're here? And the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, financial, and the social all kind of collectively constitute the spiritual. But if you haven't figured that out, if you don't know what ultimate meaning you really want your life to have, that is such an important question. Because again, you only maybe have 50, 60 good years on this earth to do what you want to have, or do what you want to do, and have the type of relationships and make the kind of impression you want upon the world. Only you can define your happiness, and only you can ultimately define your purpose. Even if you're religious and you believe that there's a God who gave you this beautiful gift of life, and you have things like you have a spiritual obligation to convert people to your religion or share your beliefs, that's fine. But there's a lot left in there that's not clearly defined. What other goals do you have with your life? What is your purpose? What is your meaning? What do you ultimately want your life to be about? And these are big questions. So, in summary, I do believe there are at least essentially six pillars of identity: physical, intellectual, emotional, financial, social, and spiritual. And these together collectively sum up everything we are as a human being. And we are so much more than muscles. We're so much more than a nice set of abs, a good-looking chest, big arms. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I do believe that it's every man's responsibility, and every man should strive to maximize every single one of those areas in his life. And I hope this track today inspired some thought. I hope that it gets you guys thinking, and you start reading and start really identifying what you want your life to be about, and what are some hobbies that you want to have, and what are some things that you want to check off that bucket list. Speaking with an individual recently who told me that she shoots too many arrows in too many directions. That's fine as long as they're not all within the same category. So if you have too many physical goals, yes, there are only really one or two that you can focus on at one time. There is some degree of mutual exclusiveness, because you only have so much time and effort and energy and resources that you can pour in any task at any given point in time. But you can work on all six of these at the same time. And even then, the spiritual, the purpose, the meaning, that's more of a why question. What's really driving you, and what do you want your life to be about, and why are you doing it? All the other ones are things that can be worked on in the meantime. So you wake up, tell you what, you wake up, you get your cardio in, or you get your workout in. And if you're doing cardio, you can read. You're already working on the physical, and you're already working on the intellectual. Emotional fulfillment, you can work on. If you heard my other tape where I was talking about the whiteboard, every morning I get up, I have a couple questions that I ask myself to really get in a powerful emotional state of mind. And what am I happy about? What am I grateful for? And what do I love about myself more than yesterday? Financial, what are you doing work-wise that is creating value with others? And if you want a way to get rich, find a way to give $100 worth of value to somebody for $10. And if you can over-deliver like that, you're not going to have a problem making money. And relationships. Relationships take work. What kind of people do you want to surround yourself with? How do you feel about the kind of people that are around you right now? Are you happy with a lot of the people around you? Are they contributing to your life? Are they making you feel inspired? Are they making you feel like your life is just incredible? Or is that something you need to work on? Do you have a good, emotionally fulfilling, rewarding relationship right now? Or is that something that you maybe want to start working on? These are all things that you can work on, all six of these pillars every single day. They're not mutually exclusive in that regard. Granted, you can only work on, one, maybe two at a time, depending on how you structure your day, but they are all of equal value. And the fact that the physical requires so much less time and effort than all the other ones. The physical one is easy, but way overemphasized. especially for my bros listening to this that put so much time and effort into the gym, into their diet, into their supplementation, into their health, into all of that. Look, the health is the one that takes the least amount of time and effort, and there's so much more life out there once you start working on the other 5. I hope this has been entertaining and provoked some thought and is somewhat inspirational for you guys. Thanks for listening. I hope you liked it. If you have any comments, questions, anything you'd like me to talk about in future podcasts, let me know. Send me an email, fitcoachjerome@gmail.com. Love feedback, and you guys have been tremendously supportive so far. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon.